almost like a halo in the camera effect. All right, it is finally gone. I always have to kill time when I have to record because it gives an indeterminate amount of time when it will finally do it. The beginnings of Islam. Let's see how this world religion started. All right. So just a quick review from last week. We know that Arabs needed to adapt to survive because the Arabian Peninsula is really, really tough to live in. And as we had in there, nomads going from oases to oases to feed their herds. They lived in tents. They lived off the food from their animals. That's right. They had the yogurt. They had the cheese. They used the meat every now and then, but you didn't want to kill your milk factory because then, you wouldn't have your cheese or your yogurt. Some people, like Aiden said, you know what? Moving around every day in this hot desert is hard. And they decided to go and settle down near an oasis. And they became merchants and had caravans, transported goods across the desert. It was just awesome. Remember, they traveled in caravans for protection because Matthew sees that Madeline, Aiden, and Jacob have all this stuff. Matthew might try to beat them up and steal that stuff. But if, Jacob and Aiden and Madeline have Elijah going with them and Onedo and Sahil and Saya and Sarah and Simon, then perhaps he will be afraid of attacking such a large group. Now, we're going to be talking about a very, very important city. Now, back then, it was called Makkah, M-A-K-K-A-H. But today, it is known as Mecca, M-E-C-C-A. Now, Mecca is an incredibly important civilization. It's really going to wind up being the center of Islam, as we're going to see, because of everything that happened with Muhammad there. And so much so it's the center that if you say something is the Mecca of something, you say that is the central gathering point. Like people would be like, oh, E3 is the Mecca of gaming, or like that is the Mecca of car shows, because everyone goes there if they're interested in that kind of thing. And we're going to see Mecca is going to become an important city. Through the whole story that we have, it was known as Makkah, but today we call it Mecca. So just don't be confused hearing it. It's the same place, okay? Same place. Mecca, Makkah. And an important location there is the Kaaba, which we see the outside of it here and the inside of it here. The Kaaba is going to be super interesting. And everyone's always like, what's going on with that swirl? Is this like a Harry Potter like wind thing when all like the death guys come on down? I can't remember their name. What are they? But no, someone just like swirled it and Photoshop. Anyways, the Kaaba is different today than it was back then. Originally, it was much like this. It was this small square building, but circled around it were statues of gods and goddesses. Can't speak today, sorry. Inside is, a stone that they believe came from heaven. We think probably a meteorite. So heavenly stone, and on the outside, all of these gods and goddesses. And we're going to see Mecca is going to be the focal point for our stories for the next couple days. Because you see, we have to remember, before monotheism, these people were polytheistic. And we know that from last year. It's when you worship more than one god or goddess. So originally, the Arabs were polytheistic and they worshipped at the Kaaba. Do we have any questions before we move on? Yes, Mama of the Mias.
Why is the building a box?
Because that's just how they designed it and it looks cool. Sorry, I can't tell you more than that. It's not the original building, obviously. It's been updated and nicer, as we can see that they have like air conditioning and stuff there. Moving on. All right, so we get to Muhammad. Muhammad is going to be the founder of Islam. So he's the person who founds the religion of Islam. And you'll often hear him referred to as the prophet. In fact, 99% of the time, if you hear someone just say the prophet, they are probably talking about Muhammad. In Judaism and Christianity, there were many prophets. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Jonah. And so you would hear the prophet Isaiah, the prophet Jeremiah. But with Islam, there is one. It's Muhammad. So if you hear the prophet, 99% of the time they're referring to this man, Muhammad, which you'll notice will not be depicted here because that would depict there not going to be pictures of Muhammad because in Islam you don't make pictures of Muhammad. Much like with the icons, they didn't want to have worship of it. Now, Muhammad had a hard life growing up. So before he was born, his daddy died. Bummer. So he never got to know his dad. His mother dies at the young age of when he's 6. So he goes lives with his grandparents, who then die when he's 8. So the poor guy has had so much loss. Yeah, it's right in your week 6 folder there, darling. At least it better be, unless Aiden hacked it some more. Now, Arab laws at this time with inheritance meant that he could not inherit any of the money from his family because he was a minor, meaning he was a child. He was not an adult yet. Minors couldn't inherit money. So Muhammad goes and lives with his uncle. And his uncle was a merchant. And his uncle wasn't going to slow his life down because he has some kid with him. He said, no, Muhammad, you're coming with me on all of these journeys. So he went to Syria, to present-day Lebanon. He went all over the Arabian Peninsula on these journeys to go and trade. And he picks up the profession from his uncle. He learns how to be a good merchant. And Muhammad becomes extremely famous and well known because he was an honest merchant, which is sad that that was actually unique. A lot of merchants back then, particularly with some of the Bedouins, they were dishonest. Simon would be like, oh, I'm going to sell you a foot of cloth. And, he'd give you 11.5 inches. Exactly. People would get scammed all the time. But Muhammad was known for always telling the truth. He would always go and do the right thing and make good on his things. So that was something that caught the eye of many people, including a very wealthy widow. A widow, of course, is someone whose husband has died, and she had lots of money. And she was a merchant as well, and says, Muhammad, you're such a good merchant. And even though she was a little bit older than him, they wind up going and getting married. And first it starts off like they're doing business together, and then they fall in love, and they happily get married. Muhammad now, who grew up super duper poor, now was super duper rich. Hooray. But here's the thing. He remembered what it was like to be poor. He remembered, how there are many people who did not have very much. So even though he became wealthy, he was bummed out about the realities of the world. He was upset and disappointed that things weren't fair for everyone. So he'd go to these caves near Mecca, and he would reflect upon the problems of the world. He would go think about just what a bummer it was that things weren't fair and that no one wanted to fight for the good of others. And that, my cherubs, is going to be our notes for the day. So today I'm going to leave it up a little bit longer because I can see some of you are still writing a lot, which is wild. People are thinking, well, Mr. Kenny, you go so stinking fast when we were doing it online. Yeah, I guess I do go a little bit faster, but we have less time. So today what you're going to be doing, if you go into your Monday folder, you'll see that you have an assignment, Lesson 1, A New Faith, Part 1. And with that, it is going to be 4 questions. And these questions are going to be so stinking easy because 3 out of the 4 have you looking at a map on page 399. So like literally you're going to finish this assignment in almost no time. So it's going to be super duper easy peasy. Okay. And then the other question is basically a review of last week talking about the geography. So I trust that all of my students are going to be extremely successful and work on it. Yes, it is Chapter 4, Lesson 1, Part 1, P1. And we're going to have short little things like that. So it should be easy peasy piece of cake for you guys, for you to go work on that. So please, please, please do avail yourself to the fact that in our week 6, and we see, yep, the PowerPoint should be right there on the bottom for you there, Blake, so you can catch up on anything you missed. Oh, I got to stop recording. Oh my goodness gracious. Why?